Okay, before we get into the review, first things first is I have to come out clean. And on this channel, I've stated before that I'm a Soulsborne veteran, but I've actually never beaten Dark Souls 2 till just a few days ago. So, my bad. So now that I beat Dark Souls 2, what did I think about it? Well, that's what we're going to find out in the video, but this is kind of what it felt like.
Fight back! Fight back! Fight back! Fight back!
Yeah, I was getting my ass handed to me by Scholars of the First Sin. Now, like a lot of the Soulsborne community, I kind of like the pain. But funny enough, while playing Dark Souls 2, Shadow of the Erdtree came out, so I took a break to play that, which was spectacular, by the way. So if you haven't picked that up, go ahead and play that right now. But that's neither here or there. Now, in this review, we're going to go over the following: the gameplay, graphics and sound, the story, and finally my verdict on the game. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Oh man, Dark Souls 2. I have very complicated feelings about this game, and I think I come from a very interesting perspective, seeing that this is the last one that I have completed out of all the Soulsborne games out there from Software, right? I beat Dark Souls 1, now Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Sekiro, Bloodborne, Demon Souls, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree, all that prior to finally beating Dark Souls 2, which I loved for the most part. And now you have to take into account that I'm very biased. Look, I love everything from Software, but also in the aspect that I've beaten all those other games prior to. A lot of these games which have many quality of life improvements, just years of development experience and skill that led to what many would consider better games, right? Now, Dark Souls 2, while maybe not up to the top echelon, was still really, really good. Now, before we get into detail of the gameplay and the mechanics, I kind of just want to talk about the difficulty, especially in terms of the environments and the bosses. Look, this is how I usually play these games, right? Is usually first time in a new area, I clear everything out, try to pick up as many items as I can, find as many secrets as I can, and then when I come back to an area, I usually just fly through it because I've been through it, I've experienced it, I'm good. And usually how it is in most of these games, the bosses are super hard, environments not so hard, you know, except some exceptions, some area, Anor Londo, swamp areas, etc. In this game, it's the opposite. Dark Souls 2, the environments are way harder and the bosses are way easier. Now, let's be real here, right? Could my experiences in these games have led it to be a little bit easier, especially boss-wise? Yes, for sure. I mean, I've been in every other game, experienced everything you can think of. And in this game, well, the bosses were a piece of cake, except maybe two of them. But the environments here, oh my gosh. And I know Scholar of the First Sin, which is what I played, not the original Dark Souls 2. In this version, I know that there's a lot more groups of enemies, weird placements. But hey, it's what I played and it's what I experienced. And yeah, the placements of these enemies was kind of wild. To the point where it just seemed like there was really not that much thought behind it in terms of design. It's kind of like, hey, this is Souls, it needs to be hard, let's throw some enemies. It kind of felt like that sometimes, to be honest. And the runbacks, oh my gosh, don't even get me started with some of these boss runbacks. And again, my experiences now, the America statues, the newer games, even some of the newer games, right, can have some terrible runbacks. In this game, they are the absolute worst that I've experienced in any Souls game. Oh my gosh. And for all you people that love Dark Souls 2, hold on, don't leave just yet, because I do have good things to say about the gameplay. And after all I just said, I still love the game. And here's the main reason why, right? Dark Souls 1, one of my favorite games of all time, Bloodborne, Elden Ring. That sense of adventure that you get from these games, from finding a new area or running into something different and new, somewhere unexpected, that feeling, that sense of adventure is still here in Dark Souls 2. And I love that, especially like the first 3/4 of the game were just amazing in that respect. And it felt like Souls again. It's something new to me. And I'm glad I had that experience, because you can play a game over and over again, but there's nothing like the first time. Which leads me to what I think is the best aspect about Dark Souls 2, and that it's its interconnectivity between the map and all the different areas you can go to. From the start, there's 2 points you can really go to, main areas, but it opens up super quick and you can kind of go in whatever order you want. Aside from that, the hub area, Majula, is incredible, and it's up there for the best hub area, if not the best. Okay, now let's get into the detail of the actual gameplay and the mechanics. So I hear a lot about this game and its movement, how it feels a little janky, a little weird. And yeah, it does feel different. I think because you can roll in 8 directions and there's some dead zones in there. Once I got used to it, it's not so bad. It really isn't. When you lock on, sometimes rolling feels a little bit weird, but overall, it's not too bad, and I don't see why it's such a big deal for a lot of people. I think it's fine. The other thing that's very interesting gameplay-wise is rolling. Now, if you played any of the SOULSBORNE games, you know when you roll, you get some iframes, right? Invincibility frames. When you roll, when the enemy attacks, if you time it right, you don't get hurt, right? Even if you're rolling into attacks. That is the way I play now. Trust me, when I first played Dark Souls 1, all that, I was a shield guy, and that's fine. However you want to play, don't let me be that guy. But however you want to play is fine. But in this game, I played that way, where I just rolled everywhere, try to get through attacks. But interesting enough, there's a stat that actually changes how many iframes you have. In this game, you start out with less iframes than you would in Dark Souls 1, and you can increase your agility stat to increase those iframes. So I increased my agility stat to 105 to I think get 13 iframes, which is a little bit more than the Dark Souls 1, which I think had 11. So anyways, it's complicated, but it's so interesting to me, and I do not like that you have to increase that, which increases your evasion technically. But I think that should be something that's just standard, depending if you got a heavy roll, slow roll, whatever. I think that should be the only factor that changes it. So if you play Dark Souls 2, increase that stat. So aside from that, not too many big differences, honestly. It's kind of the same bread and butter as Dark Souls 1 and 3, where you have to do crowd control, you have to be very careful about your decisions and committing to moves and dodging and blocking, and you have spells, incantations, pyromancy. So overall, that's pretty much the same. Even the items you get using Estus. So in that respect, it's all fine. Just a little bit of an adjustment in terms of rolling and movement in this game. Okay, now that we got in depth with the gameplay of Dark Souls 2, let's move on to the graphics and sound. Okay, so I just beat Dark Souls 2 in July of 2024, and it came out in March 11th of 2014. So I beat this game 10 years after it came out, and honestly, it sounds and looks incredible. And sure, the lighting and the models look pretty good relative, considering that it's a 10-year-old game. But really, like anything from Software, the main ingredient in how beautiful these games look is the art direction, where Dark Souls 2 is just in line with every other game in the SOULSBORNE library. And it's actually quite shocking how good this game looks 10 years later. I mean, I just beat Shadow of the Erdtree, which of course blows this out of the water. But really, Dark Souls 2 stands its ground pretty good. And like most Dark Souls games, there's not a lot of music playing, right? You have boss battles, your hub area, your intro, title screen. But aside from that, there's not much going on, and that's pretty standard. Now, what is available is quite fantastic, and a lot of the sounds feel reused from Dark Souls 1, but the music, especially what I've been playing throughout the whole video, Majula's theme, is quite calming, soothing, and again, just kind of adds to why this hub area in Dark Souls 2 is so spectacular. Okay, now that we've discussed the gameplay and the graphics and sound, what about the story of Dark Souls 2? Well, if you've ever played a Souls game, it will feel very familiar, not just in the plot and the goals you're trying to achieve, but also in the sense of what's told to you and how it's told to you. And so if you played Dark Souls 1, it will feel very similar to you, maybe a bit too similar in the respect that you're this cursed being who is trying to end his curse. And by doing so, or to do so, you have to kill the king, Vendrick. And I won't spoil everything, but you have to kill the king and you have to gain these souls by killing these creatures, or almost god souls, right? And again, it feels very similar to Dark Souls 1, where you're trying to repeat this cycle of reigniting the flame or choosing not to. And like most Soulsborne game, the fun of it for me isn't really while you're experiencing it. Sure, you want something that carries the plot and what you're doing, but really for me, these games, the way it works for me is I'm intrigued and I want to know more. So I go out of my way to find lore videos, go to sleep watching body video, like it's that kind of thing for me that makes these stories so special. And that's the cool thing about it, that it doesn't force you. It doesn't force this stuff down your throat. It's like, hey, if you're intrigued, dive in, get in there. But if not, hey, don't worry about it. Just go kill these epic creatures, go to these epic locations, and go through some very difficult stuff. Okay, so now that we've discussed the gameplay, the graphics and sound, and the story of Dark Souls 2, how did I feel about the entire experience? Well, I just want to say that I'm really glad that I finally took the time to play it myself, because honestly, all the negative things that I would hear about it, that it's the weakest in the library, all the issues it has, it kind of kept me from playing the game and experiencing it for myself, which in the end, I loved. And look, just know that while I said a lot of negative things about Dark Souls 2, I'm essentially comparing it to every other game in its library of Soulsborne games, right? Some of the best games of all time, some of the highest quality games that have ever been made. So I'm comparing Dark Souls 2 to some of the GOATs. I have to give Dark Souls 2 high praise because, look, Dark Souls 1 is likely, depending on the day, my favorite game of all time. And what that game did for me, what it reignited in my passion for video games, is second to none, right? But Dark Souls 2 got close. It had glimpses of that excitement of adventure and wonder. And for that, Dark Souls 2 was an amazing experience. A challenging and frustrating one at times, sure, but also one that I don't regret and that I would recommend. In the end, I would give Dark Souls 2 an 8.5 out of 10 and an absolute must play for fans of the Soulsborne series, and for those who are not, it might be a little bit hard to get through, but if you're willing to put in the time, you will have some amazing adventures and an overall incredible experience with Dark Souls 2. So that concludes our Dark Souls 2 review. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. That way you can catch future content. And if you didn't like the video, please let me know in the comment section below. Again, I appreciate all of you. Thank you guys so much and have a great day.